Well, this day had to come sooner or later. There comes a time in every computer's life where it has to go from being a 1 to a 0, or something in between, even though that's not how binary works. I don't know. I'm not the king of snazzy sayings, but anyway. This is going to be a tour of my Inspiron 1454, I believe the model number is, circa 2009. It's come to the end of its life as my daily driver. Not that I'm going to get rid of it. I never throw away a good working computer if I can help it. But as it turns out, this one is beginning to show its age, and given the fact that the stuff that the computer industry is producing is getting more and more neutered by the day, I figured I'd better upgrade while I can still get a computer with substance. So that's the logic behind the decision. I figured I'd give this a tour, just in case anybody ever buys one of these used, or in case anyone's curious. So anyway, it's an Inspiron 1454. I'm pretty sure that's the model number. 13-inch. That's interesting because it's Friday the 13th. Better not step on any cracks. But anyway, as you can see, it has an abbreviated keyboard that's actually better than a lot of Dell's abbreviated keyboards. All of the hotkeys are up here on the top instead of being in random places like on the number keys or the up and down keys rather. I love Dell's older latitudes, like the ones from around 2004 to 2006, but they put hotkeys in weird places that I never particularly cared for. This is not as well equipped as those, ironically, because it is a consumer-grade laptop, and it is a bottom-of-the-barrel base model, but it's actually very nice for a base model. Maybe not as Dells go, but just as computers go in general. It was well equipped on the inside, at least. Originally, this computer came with a 130 gigabyte hard drive. It came with 2 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM, Pentium dual-core processor, clocked at 2 gigahertz. I don't know what generation it was. That, you know how Intel has their naming schemes that don't seem to make much sense. And came with Windows Vista Home Basic. And I actually used Windows Vista Home Basic in that default configuration, completely stock, for 5 years, and I actually loved it. Hardly had any issues with it. I did have one issue, or two issues. One was where installing software for a very sketchy digital video camera would actually make my optical drive disappear. Like the computer would no longer recognize it every time I tried to install this software. System Restore took care of that, but I was probably better off without that software anyway. It came on a mini disc. It was really, I don't even remember the brand name. And the other issue was with using a travel mouse. You know, those little tiny travel mice. I had one from IBM, and I tried using it, and it would make the computer go to sleep randomly whenever I plugged it in. No matter what I set the control panel to, it would just override that, and I'd be working on something, and the screen would go dark, and it would go into sleep mode. And you have no idea how agonizing that is until it happens to you. The only way to fix that was to reboot the machine. And ironically, when I installed this mouse, you know how mice come with software that no one ever uses? I actually installed a software, and I guess it updated a driver or something that took care of it. But I guess that makes sense, because Windows Vista, the whole reason people hated it was because of the lack of compatibility. It actually ran pretty well on 2 gigabytes of RAM. I have to admit it was a little more doggy in some ways, but in some ways it was lighter than Windows 7, so it's give and take. I actually liked some elements of it better than Windows 7, namely the networking. You know how when you go down here you have this one little window? Like Windows Vista would actually have a nice big window in the center of the screen. This just has this over here. And the one pet peeve I have with this is, you know this refresh button up here? It never works. You can click it all you want. It doesn't actually refresh anything. It actually would in Windows Vista. But anyway, as far as externally, we have touchpad down here. no multi-gestures at that time, but it does have actual buttons and left and right click, which you don't get a lot nowadays, and luckily my new one does have it. I'm going to make a separate video about that, but this one also does, and I really prefer that over having multi-touch gestures any day. That's just me. On the front, we may need some auxiliary lighting here. You know, you try to make it as bright as possible. So from left to right, we have our power indicator that also is our charging indicator. I think that's pretty standard. Pinhole microphone in a very inopportune place. You can hear the hard drive clicking away, and you can also hear the CPU fan, which happens to be running right now. It's very loud. But you got headphone jack and microphone jack, which can also be used as line-in. You don't see two separate ones a lot nowadays. SD card reader with a blank in it. On the left, we have, so there's a Kensington lock port, power input, which uses a very odd type of adapter that it's not compatible with any of the universal laptop charging things. See that? It's like a octagonal shape, and I don't know what Dell was thinking using that, but whatever. Two USB ports. I have a hub plugged in right now. That's VGA, Ethernet with no lights on it. And the hard drive bay is here. Very convenient place for replacing it, which I did. Did I mention before? Yeah, I upgraded to a 500 gigabyte hard drive. Still 500, or no, 5400 RPM. Sorry, I was getting the two numbers mixed up for some reason. And I also upgraded to 4 gigabytes of RAM, which very nice. You know, 2 is just a little too little if you're going to do anything serious nowadays. You can get away with it, but you know, I've maxed out 4 gigs many times, so I'm glad to have the extra memory. And over here, just a single USB port that you probably can't see. DVD/CD drive. Can do any optical media imaginable. And right here is actually an express graphics card slot. So this is a blank, but you can put an express graphics card in if you so choose, which is handy if you ever wanted to play. It's always hard to get back in. Play any games, because this has integrated graphics, no graphics card on it. No webcam either. They did have a webcam on the higher end model, which this is not, and they had dual microphones around it, which would have been a much better setup, because you wouldn't have to hear the hard drive clicking. But, you know, you can't have everything. Have to admit it was, like I said before, pretty decently equipped in 2009 for a very bottom of the barrel machine. And as you can see, I've upgraded to Windows 7 as well, 64-bit home premium. But it has come time to relegate this to second in command or anything. I plan to keep it here at my desk, and I've been using it attached to an external monitor, you know, external keyboard that I showed you before, mouse, all that sort of thing. I think I did. This is my second time shooting this video because I had an interruption from some cats before that had to be addressed. So I hope I'm saying everything that I wanted to say. I can't remember what I said in this video and the last one. But in terms of battery life too, that's another thing. The original battery would give you about 2 hours of life, which, well, it wasn't impressive, it was pretty standard. And of course the original battery died probably around 2013. I would get about half an hour, and that was it. And unfortunately, Dell, I can't seem to find genuine replacements for it, so I've been relying on knockoffs that die after about 6 months. But they work well when they're new, so yeah, it is what it is. I actually had one knockoff last me 2 years, so it was well worth the $15 I paid for it. My advice is, if you do buy a knockoff battery for these, just get the standard 6-cell ones. Don't get the extended runtime batteries, because they don't give you any extra life, and they tend to fail faster in my experience. So don't even bother with those clunky things. So I'm planning to wipe this installation. I have CCleaner wiping the free space. I deleted a bunch of files and I'm having it overwrite it for security reasons. And I plan to dual boot this actually. Linux Mint is going to be one of the OSs that I'm going to put on here, the latest version of Linux Mint. And then I'm going to put a version of Windows on here as well, and I'm torn between 3 different versions. Part of me wants to reinstall Vista, just for nostalgia. I also kind of wanted to put Windows XP Black Edition on here, an unofficial build, just because I've never had XP on a laptop. I think I mentioned before that this was the first ever laptop that I owned. Before that it was just desktops. So I kind of want to use a mobile version of XP. My other plan was to put something called Tiny 7, which is also a fan-built version of Windows 7. It's basically Windows 7 Ultimate that's been cut down to fit on older hardware and can run comfortably on 512 megabytes of RAM. I've tried it out on that much, and it actually runs beautifully on just 512 megabytes. I swear, it runs better than Windows XP did on 512 megabytes. Or it might just be the fact that my install of XP on that hardware was just really bloated and slow for other reasons, but I don't know, I was very impressed. You don't get Arrow on there, but it's not a big deal. They cut out a bunch of the bloatware that Windows 7 comes bundled with. It's between those 3. I might just do Vista, who really knows. We'll see. Although a lot of things are out of support for that in XP as well, so it's a decision I'll still have to make. Maybe I'll make another video on that. But for now, this is how it is. And, well, thanks for watching. So, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me or Mr. Smiley. He'll answer the questions as well. And until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.